Welcome to this episode of Disappointment Inspired. This week we have actor John Morello. He's going to talk to us about taking emotions and bringing them to the stage. Let's kick off with our little intro of the show here. Welcome to this episode of Disappointment Inspired, the show where we talk about how to cope with pain, loss, and failure by using different skills. In this episode, we're talking about acting, how to use acting to express ourselves. Behind me is a statue of Rocky, of course, the legendary movie character from the Rocky series. And today on the show, we have John Morello and Dr. Mikey Fallon, who are both actors, and they're going to be talking about the craft. Rocky was such a great character that they made an iconic statue after it. So acting can really change the world. So hope you enjoyed this episode. There we go, John. And Mikey Fallon will not be joining us today. We don't think he's got the invitation, but he may be busy. But John is certainly actor enough to carry us through this episode. Thanks for joining us, John.
Good to be here.
You know, I think probably a cool place to start is some of your credits, your upbringing in acting. We're talking before we started the Zoom just about you going out for a play in high school, and before that there was a church play where a cross almost killed you as it fell down.
Yeah. I was in this church play, and I didn't want to. I'd always, since I was little, being the youngest, I always wanted attention. So I was always doing little plays. I was recording things from the TV and then like imitating the voices and doing cartoon voices and just being had to have the attention when I was little, whatever I could get. And so.
Well, that's a good question to start with. It really is. As I look at you have a BA in theater, tons of plays, stand up, now do a one-man show called Dirt where you travel all around. Do you need to have this like unquenchable thirst for attention when you're young to pursue?
Yeah. I don't know if you need. It's one of those things that you don't realize you have until you kind of look back on it. You know, it wasn't like at the time I was like, yes, I do this because I have a need for attention because I'm the youngest. Like I just didn't have that kind of right. Self-awareness. But I think there's it feels good to whenever you create something, whether you're making a piece of pottery or making a painting or creating a song or whatever, making a film, doing a TikTok, and it feels good when people like it and people see you and recognize that, hey, you did something good. How often do we get that nowadays, especially online, where somebody's like, hey, that really touched me and it was good. Like you just don't hear that too often online. But so I think when I was younger, I enjoyed it, and I was having a hard time in school anyway. So acting was one of the few things. I wasn't good enough at sports to really play on any of the teams. I enjoyed them, but I didn't play any of them. I did this church play, Brittany. Since you're our only one right now, I'll just direct this right to you. So, so I was doing this church play where they wanted me to play Jesus, and I had like long hair at the time, and they were like, "This kid's perfect." So they just gave me a fake beard and stuff, and I'm posing with. Now all they wanted me to do was pose, hold a cross, while they would read like sad poems about the crucifixion and stuff. And I was like, all right, I got this. I can just like sit still. It was this giant cross. It was like really heavy. It was an actual, I don't know where crosses are us. I don't know where they went to Home Depot and they got a cross for if you wanted to do like a backyard crucifixion for your friends or whatever, you could just like do that. So I'm holding this cross. And right in the middle of like this really poignant, meaningful part, the cross starts to slip, and then it actually comes apart and falls apart. And so then the audience gasps, and then I thought like, well, normally they would just say like, keep going. Like if there's something goes wrong on stage, you just keep going. So I was like starting to pick up the cross to like put it back together, and then I was like, no, Jesus wouldn't do that. If you were about to be executed, like if you were sitting in the electric chair and then the power went out, you wouldn't be like, throw that breaker over there. If you just like, so I was just put there with my face red and looking down. So,
but it didn't stop you. I mean, it sounds like you
didn't stop me. did the school play. It was like the only reason why I went to school. I was kind of a good C and D student, but it was the only thing that got me going to school was theater. And then once I got to college and majored in theater, it was like I reinvented. I found my people. I found my tribe, and found all the other broken toys like me. And that was the people that listened to better music. And
that's the thing about the pandemic, John, that I wonder so much about. What about all the kids like you, say in high school, who, when all those extracurriculars went away, their reasons for getting up in the morning, there's no sports, there's no theater, what in the world did they do? Did they just, what do you think you would have done if you were a high school kid during the pandemic?
Wow, that's a great question. I think I would have sunk into a very dark place. I think I would. So like inactivity leads to more inactivity, and it's almost like quicksand. And so I think I just didn't have enough positive supports in my life at that time, where I don't know if, I mean, I would have survived, but I would have definitely gone to a dark place first.
Well, that's a good segue then for the first clip we have. We have an acting clip, two of them actually, that we're going to show today. This first one is of John, a new show that we're working on, and we can talk about it on the other side here.
I'm 8 years old, and I'm out in the front yard, and I played a lot by myself when I was a little kid. I was living out in Michigan, which looks like this. The whole state is very proud of it. Like, where I'm at, that's kind of like all they got. And I was living in this little suburb, and I was playing with a Swiss Army knife because I was 8, so I had a knife because it's Michigan. This isn't synced up.
It was those days. Yeah, what's going on here?
Give kids.
Let's try this again, guys. What? I've never seen that before, but I'll try it again. Weird, huh? Let's go here to this clip. Hopefully this one works, guys.
My father, you made me think my father used this.
Bummer. Had it all set up too.
Yeah.
Ready to work. Why wouldn't it do it?
Yeah, that's all right. You can just so basically there's when I first started doing theater, I would always play other characters. I would do classic characters. I would do Shakespeare. I would do Arthur Miller plays Death of a Salesman, and I always played somebody else. And then I went to Broadway, and I saw a show by this. This was the title of it: "Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll" by Eric Bogosian. And I was like, I'll go see that play, And I saw that. It was just a guy doing monologues. He was playing other characters, but it was kind of like he was playing himself too. And then I saw some of his other shows, and it was more just him talking about life and delivering monologues. And so I thought, oh, this is a really interesting approach. And this is like a whole different level that I didn't consider, that I could go on, that I could do a play without having to have other people on stage with me. And that also my character, myself, that if I just sort of amped it up a little bit, would be interesting enough that an audience would want to watch, So that was kind of a turning point for me. And I started writing plays where I played other characters and where I also just spoke as myself.
You have a show now called Dirt, which some people watching this may be familiar with. It's a one-man show. You're in lots of schools playing different characters on stage. And that seems to be a very specific type of acting. I imagine most actors aren't used to doing monologues, certainly not for that long. They're used to maybe playing off of other people. And I would think that in some ways is easier than certainly what you do, getting up and just taking it all on your shoulders. So what made you want to just go out and do monologue? I mean, was it that Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll show that you saw? Did that kind of inspire you?
Well, that was inspired me for the style of the show that I wanted to do, but that didn't inspire the content. I think, like any artist, I think it's important. I mean, you're not going to say something unless you have something to say. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that just have blind ambition and want to say anything on stage and get people to clap at them. But I had something to say. I had these things that I was feeling in my heart. And so it doesn't matter how good of a poet or a musician you are, people aren't going to care unless you've got something interesting to say and kind of find your voice. So I had a lot of addiction in my family. I had was gradually losing. I'd already lost one brother to an accident, to a motorcycle accident, and my other brother was a heroin addict at the time, and he was getting worse. And I felt really alone in my family. I felt really alone in my neighborhood, and I just felt like I was the only one that had all this stuff going on in his family. And so I took a lot of those feelings and wrote about them. And I wanted people to understand how I felt, and I wanted people to understand where I came from, the people that I grew up around, and how I'd sort of gotten to this point. So yeah, it was just wanting to connect.
Well, I rebooted the clip. Let me see if we can try one more time on the acting clip, and I hope it works for us. If not, we'll abandon it. Let's give it a shot. Ready?
Well, it's disappointment, the show. So you got it.
Of course.
This is disappointment. I'm 8 years old, and
it's
and
not
I'm out
going to do it
in the front yard.
Let's listen.
And I played a lot by myself when I was a little kid. I was living out in Michigan, which looks like this. The whole state is very proud of it. Like where I'm at, and that's kind of like all they got. And I was living in this little suburb, and I was playing with a Swiss Army knife because that's, I was 8, so I had a knife because it's Michigan. And it was those days too where they could give kids knives. It's like, like a prize. You'd win it. Like, first prize would be like a carton of cigarettes. Second would be like a knife. So I had a knife, and I'm out in my front yard, and I have a golf ball, and I'm cutting open a golf, because I heard this urban legend in the neighborhood that if you cut open a golf ball, there's all these elastic bands in there, and then it's like a core, and they're wound in a ball. And so that if you get to that core of all those elastic bands, there's like this magic thing that happens, and you just like pull it a little bit, and it all unwinds all at once. It's in a furious way. And so I got there and I did that, and I had all this pile of elastic bands, and I was like, yeah, that was amazing. And my friend and I, we decided to take the elastic bands and stretch it across the street, tie it to my tree, tie it to his tree, and we sit there and wait all day for cars to come by to snap this elastic band. This like so thin. And that was like our joy. We're just doing that all day. And so then he goes in, and I'm out there by myself still. And this little lonely kid in the front yard, just playing. And I do like double, triple, quadruple elastic bands across the street. And I'm waiting for a car to come, and I see a car come, and I'm like, yeah. And the car turns, and behind it is a motorcycle. And I start panicking. And the motorcycle comes in, and the guy hits the elastic band, goes right around his neck, and he wipes out. And he didn't get hurt. His bike got a little damaged, but he was okay. And he just got up, and he saw me standing there. He saw what I had done, and I panic. And he comes over, and I just go running in the house, and I just like hide in my room. And he's yelling at my dad in the front yard. And then my dad comes in the house, and he's like, finds me, and just says to me the thing that so many adults seem to say to me for a lot of my life, and maybe still do. Just looks at me and says, "What the hell is wrong with you?" At that moment, of course, you don't know this at the time. As the philosopher Kierkegaard said, life can only be understood backwards, but unfortunately, we have to live it forwards. But at that moment, I start to wonder, what the hell is wrong with me? And so I'm already in the mode where I'm different than everybody else, and there's something wrong with me.
And that's where the clip stops. And I will stop here. I will say it's kind of like those old kung fu movies I would watch on Saturday mornings, right? When it's dubbed poorly, you're like trying to follow. But I still got maybe in some ways, the disappointment of that clip not syncing up made me hear your words better than when I watched you. Because I really felt, the pause and just that moment where your dad, what the hell is wrong with you? And I'm curious, like, what does that feel like at the time that happens?
Boy. Well, everything is bigger, when you're a little kid. The world is, physically everything is just bigger, and you're little. But so, to take that metaphorically, when little things happen, they feel really big, because it's the first time that you're feeling these things. And so I was the type of kid that if I screwed up or somebody yelled at me, it was kind of ruined my day. It wasn't just like I just brushed that off and went on. I just really fixated on it. And then of course you just like, I can't do anything right. And I'm, you go to these big extremes. I'm a failure. And and it was just one thing, but you hyper focus on it, just like this little beats thing. Like, this is just one little headphone thing. But if you focus on it that closely, suddenly it's the whole damn screen if you sit there and stare at it. So yeah, and especially it means, people have said, I'm not the first one to express this, that like people that have had their parents discipline them, maybe even like hit them, which was more common when we were growing up, but unfortunately still happens. A lot of people say that they would rather have their parents hit them than yell at them. Like the emotional stuff, the emotional thing that your parents can put you through is, it's like, you just spank me and get it over with, rather than like sit there and shame me and treat me like crap, like, but I don't think my dad, he shamed me, but I didn't feel like, but it was rare. It wasn't like this ongoing thing. I didn't feel like he was, he might have been disappointed in me that day, but he wasn't disappointed in me in life, globally.
Do you find in acting, and one of the things I'm impressed with when you perform is you have that ability to slow things down and have like a moment where it's like, ooh, the audience has to sit with this sadness, this disappointment. Do you draw upon moments like that with your dad in your acting?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of acting is sort of what they call sense memory. Just like when you are learning a new sport, if you're learning a golf swing, for instance, or learning how to shoot a free throw, there's certain things that your body does the same way every time, and the more you can streamline it, the better it is. So actors can do that physically, but they can also kind of do it emotionally. You can sort of get in touch with things and use your imagination, and if it's a character that's on stage that's like maybe being betrayed, you can go back to a time where you felt that, or something similar. It doesn't have to be the same circumstances, but the tricky thing with acting is that a lot of young actors make this mistake, that they feel like, if I'm feeling something inside, if I can make myself feel in how I felt that day, then it'll show on stage. Not necessarily true. Actually, usually not true. Acting is not feeling. acting is doing, and it's taking, like, how would this character respond to these feelings? What would this character do? So yeah, so like maybe the director tells you, you know, go over to that table and wipe down the table, but how are you going to wipe that table if you're feeling anxious? If you're trying to, are you going to sit there and scrub this one little part, like, because you're just trying to like delay, like, I know, like, before I go on a business trip, or before I have like this big project that I'm nervous, my house has never been cleaner. I like obsess and clean every little thing with it, like, furiously. So the way we do things is how we express our emotions. It's not feeling, it's doing, you know.
I heard the actor Bob Odenkirk say that to him, when he learns lines, these aren't words, these are emotions. But I imagine, like, if you can't experience the emotion as the actor up there, because if it's sadness and crying and you're actually crying and you can't think straight, that's not going to help your acting, right? You've got to perform, like you said, it's got to do something to represent the emotion. Maybe it's crying, but it's not the kind of crying that you're emotional to the point where you can't go on. You want the audience to cry because of what you said or how you said it.
Right. You don't want to be out of control on stage. An actor or any artist, really, or speaker, you want to feel like, I always look at it as like, I'm like a limo driver, and the people in the audience is getting into my limo and I'm taking them on a ride. And I don't ever want them to feel like I'm not in control. I don't ever want them worried about, is this guy gonna get into an accident? Does he even know where he's going? Does he see that pothole that's coming up here? I always want them, at the very least, to know that I got this and I'm in control. We're gonna have a good ride. It might be a fun ride. I might take you on a little joy ride, but I got this. So don't worry about the driving aspect, you know.
It's so funny you say that, because I remember being at a conference once and I was there with an agent of mine, speaker's agent, and there was a new speaker who was going to be the first keynote of this conference. And we had not seen him. We were very excited. And he seemed like a likable person. And we were, to your point, John, we got in his limo and he introduced him and he got up there. And like the both of us who had seen tons of speakers in our lifetime just had that feeling like, oh no. A few minutes in, it was like, where are we going in this limo? This isn't good. And it was not good. And like, you know, maybe 10 minutes later, we had to leave the limo and get out of that room, because it was just like, wow, how quickly you realize when someone doesn't know what they're doing. It could be seconds, right? You just get that feeling. And I guess you can do that in acting too, right? If someone isn't in control.
Yep. Yeah, you want to be in control. I remember one of the fun things we used to do is one of the acting exercises we would do. We would analyze, if you were just like picking up a pen, like, what muscles do you use to reach over and pick up? He would say, like, the teacher would just be like, okay, so what are you doing? I'm picking up this pen. He's like, no, like, what are you doing? Like, what part of your arm moves first? And what is the process for your brain to tell, like, you know, we'll get into the why you're picking up the pen and all that other stuff after, but like, you're physically, like, what are you doing? Like, so hyper focusing, so that you're, one of my favorite terms he used to use was the economy of gesture and movement. And just being more economical with your choices. And if you're going to be on stage, especially, it's difficult for us as Italians, as you see, like right now, I'm talking with my hands and I'm always like this. And but when you're on stage, everything is amplified and the audience is staring at you. So if you're going to be moving, at least be aware of it. You know, you don't, if your hands go like this while you're talking, or you're doing little things like this while you're talking, it better be because your character is doing that and not because it's you. You want to be a blank slate up there as much as possible. You want as little of you as possible up there.
So Brittany, this is a good jumping off point, and see if you're having any thoughts or questions that you have for John Morello, our actor coming to us from Worcester, Massachusetts today. We're in John's limousine right now. What do you think, Brittany?
I mean, like, yeah, like sometimes I've been known to just like to act just to show people, like, but sometimes when I'm home, I just want to be myself, not try to act in front of people.
So Brittany went deep there, talked about the acting that she does on a daily basis.
I sometimes
Yeah, well,
talk to myself a lot.
Really?
Well, we all put on our masks when we go to, whether we're going to school, we go to work, or just going to the supermarket, right? We have like a persona that we, and then we have the real us that's like home in our jammies, right?
So Brittany, how would you describe the school Brittany? If I was,
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
how would you describe the school version of Brittany? If I was to fly on the wall, I would say, oh, she's.
I must just like stay quiet, just like pretend to act like everyone else. When I'm at home, I want to act like a little energetic and not show what people how I am.
So you're more talkative at home, maybe impulsive, like just whatever comes to your mind, you say it, that kind of thing. But at school, you're like looking at other people like, how can I kind of talk like them? I remember being in high school, even sometimes now, I can match the cadence of a group that I'm in. I did a lot more when I was younger, right? You'd like read the room and say, well, I'm not going to talk too fast here because everybody seems to be talking slow and cool right now. Is that something you do? Yeah. How about you, John? How much acting do you do in your normal life?
You brought up an interesting story. My daughter was telling me, she's 15, and she goes to a school where it's like a lot of mean girls, and I'm sure they all have to act a certain way, and they're so used to behaving because they're so scared of getting made fun of. She went out on I guess we'll call it a date with this boy, and they were just like walking up the stairs. And she said, Dad, it was really funny. He was like doing 2 or 3 steps at a time. He was like happy. He was like, and I like, he was doing the uncool thing. And like, I was just thinking like something as simple as that. He was doing 2 steps at a time. Like that's it. Like it shows that he was actually just comfortable and he was comfortable enough around her that he was just being himself. But it also shows like tragically the world that my daughter was living in her school, where she kind of felt like she was so worried about what people are thinking that just like to be that like child like you that likes to take 2 or 3 steps, which I still do, by the way. Like the courage to just be yourself like that. I know it might be sort of diverting from what we were talking about, but it just reminded me of that, I guess, of like of feeling comfortable enough to be yourself. And I can understand why you wouldn't want to be in some situations, because like my daughter and other people that are in high school, like we sit there and say like, oh, be yourself, you shouldn't be ashamed to be yourself. And it's not like you're being ashamed, you're just protecting yourself, because people are genuinely cruel. Like it's not like I'm ashamed to be myself. It's just like, no, trust me, if I act anything different right now, I don't feel like putting up with the drama that it will cause, and people will literally make fun of me. So like I don't think it's being fearful. I think it's like choosing your battles, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean. You go with the flow, right? You're trying to fit in, if you will. Last week I was at a school in Maryland, and I asked for a volunteer to come up and rap a song, and this kid jumps up. Turns out he's on the spectrum, has Asperger's. Like, I didn't know this, right? He does a great job, by the way. Audience is responding really well to him. And I asked him some questions afterwards. I'm like, that was fantastic. You did a great job. Like you had the movements down, you knew the lyrics. And he says to me, yeah, I'm not normally like this here at school. This is more my camp self. And I love going to camp because this is where I can be myself and just do whatever I do. But it was unusual for me to do that at school. And I thought, well, what a really aware kid this is, that the second he had a moment where he could step outside of his school self and just be who he really is, he was aware of it. and he wanted to kind of announce it to the world. And I thought, well, what a triumph for this kid to do it in front of everybody. And I encourage him, hey, maybe there'll be more moments here that you'll feel okay doing that, because now everybody knows that you're fun and funny, and you accomplish something great when you're being yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's at camp. That's a great thing to bring up too. It's one of the things that's when I decided that my daughter would go to camp, and it was a little place where she went to. It was like it was a little tough financially at first for us to send her there, but I really felt it was important because I wanted her to, like you just said, have an identity outside of school. Because that can just wear you down and you can forget who you are. If all you have is school all day and that's all you got, then that just wears you down. You need to have, you go to camp, or you go to like a music class, or you go to your little league game, or your book club, or whatever, or you have like an online group of people that like you meet with them and you talk about anime stuff or whatever, like something that you geek out on, that like, so you're talking all passionately about it and you're into it. That it's a totally different self than you would be at school when you're behaving to survive.
So Brittany, do you have that third place? You got home where you're more yourself, your energetic self, school where you're more reserved, but do you have like a third place you go to, a class you take, or a camp you go to? Or Brittany's showing us her head, but do you have any
Sorry,
place?
it's just a little hard to hear because
Okay.
I'm in the room with some people.
No problem. I'm just curious,
Okay.
do you have that third place you go to be yourself? Like you go to camp, or you have a music class, or any extracurricular that you do?
Like a place I go to just to like be myself.
Yeah, a place that you are a
Like mostly
different
when I'm
person.
at home, like sometimes when I'm myself, like just home alone, it's like better for me to be myself, just not show my family how I really am.
So you do this at home. When you're alone, you can really be yourself. That's interesting
Yeah.
too. And I guess the idea is one day you can take. I remember thinking when I started doing stand-up, if I can take my sense of humor when I'm with my friends to the stage, like that version of me, how can I get that out and be comfortable doing in front of other people? I thought that was the secret. And maybe for Brittany, the secret might be, well, how can Brittany, who, when you're being yourself at home alone, transition that maybe to her friends at school sometimes, and just throw that out there, because who knows? I mean, that Brittany might be the best version of Brittany, I imagine. Just a thought.
Yeah.
I have a clip. I'll try one more clip, and I tweaked it so maybe it'll work. It's our colleague Mikey Fallon doing his acting piece on a new show that we're putting together, and see if we can get this clip to play. If not, we'll
It won't.
on it. It won't. It won't, because it's the show, Matt. Disappointment.
That's right.
Here we go.
Because that's not Mikey Fallon.
My father, it made me think my father used this word quite a bit with me growing up about being unassuming, and it took on a whole other life. I never looked it up my entire life until more recently, but
Can you hear that, or should I just bail on it? Was that good? Did you hear it, John?
I could hear it, but it wasn't synced up at all.
We're going to bail on it. It was a great story that I don't want to put it out there and leave it, but I will say that we are working on a new show, and it's a show that explores mental health. We have 3 characters. We have one character, me, playing the anxious person, telling stories from our lives, from our life, and then you're playing the loneliness character.
I'm playing the loneliness character. Mikey's playing the depression character. So,
and it was really your brainchild initially. You saw this as something that could be really beneficial to students. So I'm curious if you could give us some background on how this came about.
Yeah, well, I thought it was well, after everything that we'd been through for the past couple years, I felt like each one of us focused on mental health in our shows in some capacity. Even though Mike will talk a lot about, racism or social justice or gender inequities and things like that, there's a big element to it that's got mental health to it, and it's all connected to those things. And same thing with mine. I might talk about substance abuse, I might talk about bullying, but I mean, that's connected to mental health, and of course what you do as well. So I felt like more than ever, I read that article in the New York Times that said 60% of young people are getting some kind of formal mental health training. And I thought, and some people saw that as like a tragic thing. And I thought, that's great, because those are 60%. Those are all of us need it anyway. So I was like, if that's what it took to get people to get help, then that's great. It's not like this tragic thing. But then there's like 40% that are not. And then there's a lot of people that, so I felt like if you and me and Mikey could do this show that would at least begin a conversation that would show adults struggling with stuff. So often, you see speakers get up in front of kids, or adults get up in front of kids and talk about how great their life is and how they used to have problems, but then I overcame, and here's my Mount Everest, and here's me at the top of the mountain now, and I was down there, but now I'm up here. Well, I mean, if you're down there, if you're a young person, or if you're just in the audience, no matter how old you are, that just feels really crappy. It's because you feel like I could never, if that's true, you either think like I could never get to that, because part of you knows that who you are and your issues you're going to have with you your whole life in some capacity, or you just think like that person's the phoniest person in the world, and they're lying to me. So how can I take serious anything that they said? If they put themselves up on this pedestal. So I thought, like, let's do a show where we could just be ourselves, and we could say, like, these are the things that we were dealing with and we are still dealing with. And yes, we've had some victories over that. We've had some really good times where things have been healthier. So here's some of the things that we've done, and here's some of the thoughts that helped us get through and survive and learn to sort of coexist with our issues. So that was the thing that made me want to do it, Well,
I love the idea because it brings together three professionals, and Mikey Fallon, yourself, and me together on stage. And if there's one thing that I was missing before the pandemic, was that sense. And John used to do stand-up as I did at the beginning of my career. I missed that camaraderie, that connection. And then the pandemic happens. And I will say, as much as we couldn't see people, I was able to reach out to people like John and many others virtually and connect. And I thought, wow, I need to continue this. When the pandemic is dying down, I can't just make this a pandemic thing that I reached out to these people and then, we forget about them and we go back to our life. No, I want to make room for real connection when things get back to normal. And when John, you approached me with this idea, I'm like, well, this is the perfect thing. We get an opportunity to be together, perform together. And like, that's so much more meaningful, not just to us, but I think the audience too, because there's an energy to having three speakers at once, right? I mean, three stories, like you said, three adults saying, look, I've struggled and I'm still here. That's what resilience looks like. I didn't get rid of my anxiety completely. There are certain circumstances where I've definitely gotten better with it, but it rears its ugly head sometimes. And there's really not anything I can do to extinguish it entirely, but I have control over it in many cases. And I love that message, that idea, because you're right. It makes us seem flawed. And that's always good for performance, right? When the performer is vulnerable and flawed, and not someone who's perfect and glib and smooth.
And I think that's one of the things about the pandemic was that when we came together during that time, is I had this perception of, because I knew myself as an artist, I knew that I tended to isolate. I would not have thought that about you. Like how you said, it kind of forced you to reach out to people and put that kind of in your, I would have not thought that about you at all. Because I just thought, well, this guy, he's different. He's different speaker than me. He's up on stage. He's more of psych. He's done some counseling and training, so he's really good at like, talking with people. And I thought, like, this is not a guy that chooses to isolate. But I guess you do.
Yeah. I think that's definitely in my nature. Like you, Brittany, I grew up really almost like an only child. My brother, 5.5 years older than me, which meant he was off doing older kid things, which weren't really healthy for him. So I was on my own.
Yeah,
And my parents.
I had the same thing.
Really? Are you the youngest?
Yeah, every time my sibling goes out, it felt like I was an only child.
How much older are your siblings than you?
He's only 1 year older than me.
Okay. Yeah. So they say if your sibling is like 4+ years older, it is a lot like being an only child. And my parents practiced what I call benign neglect, where it was just like, all right, my mom's taking a master's class, my dad's working till 7 o'clock. You're a latchkey kid. And that's a bad word now, but back in the day, man, that's what it was. And so my comfort zone was, I'll do my thing. I'll create my little games. I'll figure it out. I'll entertain myself. And that's why I enjoy the speaking career, because so much time is spent alone on the road, traveling, driving, in a hotel. Yes, it's an intense amount of attention when you get on stage, but then you get to leave it behind and go back to that isolated self. But I realized when the pandemic hit, like, wow, this isn't healthy to be isolated at all. I really need that connection, meaningful connection, to get me through this, because I'm struggling. And I keep talking, the first 8 weeks of the pandemic were terrifying, financially terrifying. And it pushed me to the point where I had to really get over some things in my life. I had grown up with a dad who was constantly in fear of being fired, no matter how successful he was in his life. His routine was like, I could end tomorrow. They could let me go tomorrow. You're like, Dad, you won all these awards. It doesn't matter. Like, he was so pessimistic. I used to joke that he was only excited to talk to me if something bad happened to me in the story. Like, I'd be like, Dad, I had a great presentation today. But traffic sucked on the way home. Really? That is interesting. Like, he was pulling for the negativity all the time. And my point in telling you this, I know I had a point in sharing this part about my dad, but I think that my father's deprivation mindset of the sky is always falling, we're going to be broke tomorrow, was in me, right? It was in me. And the pandemic forced me to push through it and realize, oh, wow, I'm actually coming from a place of abundance. There's so many people offering their support, psychological support, financial support. Like, it's overwhelming. The government, friends, family, like, it's wow. My father was so wrong.
What does that look like? Like, when that rears its head, that whole, when your father, that worrisome and that threatening, like, oh, this could all end. And obviously you must still struggle with that, because those voices are just embedded. What does that look like in your parenting now when that when that comes out? Like, what's the red flag that you're like, if I see myself doing this, then I know that maybe Dad is ruling me from the grave a little bit more than you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. No, I do. I think it comes out in the weirdest of moments. Like, I love to cook and I make a great meal, and my daughter can impulsively load up every piece of pasta, every ravioli onto her plate. And she's not eating 13 raviolis, and there's none for anyone else, right? And like, my knee-jerk reaction is to be like, oh, we're not gonna have enough. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? And my wife's like, whoa, chill out. Like, you can just steal off her plate like you normally do. Why are you getting so worked up, right? But it definitely does come out in those moments. So that still resides in me. But I will say the pandemic forced me to get past the, oh, we're gonna be on the street someday thing. And I haven't really worried about money since. And the reason I'm kind of bringing this up is that, like, another thing I thought was, oh, I like this life of alone when I travel alone and then get up and speak and then alone again. But I'm like, you know what? I don't always like it. I think I miss those stand-up days where you're in a car with two comics and you're laughing and you're going to a gig and you bomb and then you come home and you're laughing again. Right? I mean, that's cool. That's cooler than the show. You know what I mean? Like, so
it's so hard, especially as we get older. And maybe Brittany can relate to this too. It's like, it's such a great feeling is when you make a new friend. When you genuinely make a new friend. It's such it doesn't happen like to as you get older, it happens less and less because the number of people around you, your circle shrinks. But do you know what I mean, Brittany? Like, isn't that a great feeling when you come home and you're just like, oh, that person was like really cool. I have a new friend. Like,
Yep, that's how it feels.
Have you had any new ones recently, Brittany?
Like a while ago, I was like,
yeah,
like I don't know like how many like months, like 2 months ago. I don't know.
Oh, okay, that's pretty recent. You strike me as somebody who probably still friendly with all your like kindergarten, first grade friends. You have a lot of friends from early days.
I mean, in kindergarten, I was like really shy. I didn't even spoke a word.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, mostly every time when I start like a new day in school, I'm always like the quiet one, just zip it, just don't say anything.
What I love, Brittany, is that you said before on this call that you, in other calls, that you're shy, but you're the one who's always on. You're the one who's got questions and talking. So you, in many ways, you've overcome that shyness. How have you done it?
Well, just try to relax yourself. Like when give me a quick minute. Just like try to I don't want to be shy anymore. I just want to be like a little more confident about myself.
John, do you ever find in life, like when you want to go beyond yourself, like you're like, okay, I'm shy, but I want to be this for a while. Can you use acting to kind of get you there? Like fake it till I make it. Like, have you ever done that?
Yeah, it's like like my ex-wife used to say, it was like we were going out somewhere and there was like a house party. She was like, are we going to see Party John or is it going to be Wallflower John? Like, am I going to be like the quiet guy? Or am I going to, I have like this, it is almost like a character. It's like the Italian comedian, big personality, life of the party kind of person, which I hate. Like I feel like which I haven't been that person in a while because I just, it felt inauthentic to me and it just wasn't who I wanted to be. And I realized it wasn't a natural part of me. It was more of a defense mechanism. It was coming out of an insecurity. It was coming out of a bad place. It wasn't coming out of a place where I wanted to try to make everybody else feel better or I was like having fun. It was coming from a negative place. And sometimes our characters can be coping mechanisms,
Really interesting, John. I think this is a good point to ask our final question. If we have a segment on this show, here it is. It's disappointment inspired. So, John, I'm so curious to hear about a moment or two from your life where you experienced disappointment and you noticed like, wow, it really gave rise to something special later on.
I remember this morning thinking, this is going to be a really professional podcast. And it wasn't. It turned out to not be at all. So,
what did that inspire, John?
I'll let you know at the end of the week how I dealt with that. I think. Oh, that's so cool! You're walking to school with us.
It's Brittany's time.
I moved the room because there were too many people, and it was a little hard for me to hear you guys.
Yeah. I think, well, just recently I went through some disappointment. I had a motorcycle accident. I was driving through an intersection and I was enjoying it. It was such a beautiful day and it was sunny out, and a car pulled out in front of me. I couldn't stop in time and I broke my arm. And I've been
So that
unable to.
explains why you have a cast.
That's
Yeah.
why I know people
I
think
was
it's like
gonna
carpal
ask,
tunnel or
but
something. Yeah, that's
it's quite
yeah.
yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. That's thoughtful of you that you did. Yeah, that's nice. But the disappointment is that, this whole summer, I feel like I've lost a whole summer to doing things like going to the batting cages and swinging a bat and playing baseball and golfing. And I just lost a lot of time doing those things. So that was an instance where I experienced, I've had more profound life disappointments, I suppose. But I think what this has done for me, though, is I've become way more grateful for the things that I do have in my life. It made me realize all the things that I do have. I go to physical therapy and I see all these people that have way worse injuries than me. And not that it's the pain Olympics and we're comparing ourselves to other people, but just even without that, I just feel like, I got a roof over my head, I got food in my belly, I got a few bucks in my pocket, I got a great family, I got great friends, and that's enough, And so it made me more grateful for things.
So it inspired a different perspective, especially when you're around people who have more severe injuries than you.
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
That's a common human reaction. I used to work on a spinal cord injury unit, and it always fascinated me when a new patient would come in. The routine was very similar. They would say something like, "Wow, yeah, I know I can't move my legs, but did you see the guy down the hall? He can't move anything below his neck. Like, wow, I feel so lucky to not, basically be me right now." And to a man, like, even if a person had lost all sensation, from the chest down, they still would say these things. People always look for the reason why, gosh, I'm lucky. They have a different perspective on it when they're around other people, who are struggling. And so that's interesting that you had that reaction. Now you started performing with, cast, right? And you had surgery through all this. Like, has that made you realize anything about yourself? Because initially, I don't think you thought you could do all that, right? You were like, I can't do my show.
Yeah, I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I'd be able to physically get to the gigs. I didn't know if I'd be able to live with the intense physical pain. So it taught me that I was a lot stronger than I realized. And it also taught me in some ways that I was a lot weaker than I always thought I was, and that I needed to ask for help. And that was huge. And that was so comforting to me to be able to ask for help, because I like to think that I'm, I got this, I'm in control.
It's an opportunity to let the people who love you take care of you. You don't have to always be the one, carrying the load. Brittany, any final questions or thoughts before you head to your class?
Well, I don't have any questions right now, but Matt, are we gonna maybe like meet in person the next time?
Yeah, you know what? We're gonna do a cooking episode.
Can't wait.
And I can't wait to come there, and maybe next week we could schedule it, get some culinary students and have you there.
All right.
I'm happy to see you without a mask, so maybe it's time that they'll let me come in and do this.
All right.
Thank you, Brittany. Thanks for being a part of it today.
Well, I really had to go now, so it was nice meeting
you.
John.
Nice meeting you too, Brittany.
So,
thank you. It was
bye.
nice meeting you. Take care.
Thanks, Brittany. And thank you so much, John. If we want to find more about your work, any links to work that you do, where might we go?
JohnMorello.com, or if that's too hard to remember, IamDirt.com. And it's also, or you can go to my Instagram is I am more than dirt. I wanted it to be I am dirt, but some guy in Croatia was like, I screw you, I take I am dirt. So I just said, keep it Dimitri. You can have it. And if that's anybody's name, that's a great name. You'll be a good hacker someday. But yeah, so it's IamDirt.com or I am more than dirt on Instagram.
And one day we'll have maybe a website for our 3-man show,
yes.
is tentatively titled Rites of Passage.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
maybe we'll put something together for that. But thank you so much for giving us your time today, John. I really appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.
Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
I
Bye.
really have to go now, so
Take care, Brittany. Bye-bye.